Kiryat Gat is a development town in the southern coastal plain, about halfway between Ashkelon and Beersheba, roughly 60 kilometers south of Tel Aviv. It's a city that has undergone significant transformation over the past 2 decades, driven largely by the presence of major tech employers, yet it remains off the radar for most Anglos considering where to live in Israel. The city was founded in the 1950s as part of Israel's Development Town program, intended to absorb new immigrants and populate peripheral areas. Like many development towns, it struggled for decades with limited economic opportunities, peripheral status, and the challenges that come with being far from the center of Israeli life. The population historically included waves of immigrants from North Africa, Ethiopia, and the former Soviet Union, creating a diverse but economically struggling community. The transformation began in the late 1990s when Intel chose Kiryat Gat as the location for a major fabrication plant, known as Fab 28. This decision brought high-paying jobs, professional workers, and economic activity to a city that desperately needed it. Intel's presence has expanded over the years, with the facility becoming one of the company's most important manufacturing sites globally. Other tech and manufacturing companies have followed, creating an employment base that distinguishes Kiryat Gat from other peripheral towns. Despite this economic development, Kiryat Gat hasn't become a destination for Anglos in any significant way. The Anglo community is minimal, essentially non-existent as an organized presence. There are no Anglo Facebook groups specifically for Kiryat Gat, no English-speaking synagogues, no Anglo events or infrastructure. Individual Anglo families may live there, typically connected to employment at Intel or other local employers, but they're isolated rather than part of a community. For Anglos who require or strongly prefer English-language social networks, Kiryat Gat simply doesn't offer this. Housing costs are dramatically lower than central Israel, which is the primary draw for those who do consider the city. Apartments that would cost 3 million shekels in the center might be available for under 1.5 million in Kiryat Gat. Rentals for family-sized apartments can run 3,000 to 4,500 shekels monthly, sometimes less. For families where one or both adults work at Intel or another local employer, the combination of high-tech salaries and low housing costs can create an enviable financial situation, allowing for homeownership, savings, and a standard of living impossible to achieve on the same salary in Tel Aviv. The Intel factor deserves more attention because it's central to understanding who might consider Kiryat Gat. Intel's fabrication plant employs thousands of people in high-skilled, well-compensated positions. Engineers, technicians, and other professionals work at the facility, many of whom live in Kiryat Gat or nearby communities. The company has historically employed some Anglos, either immigrants who joined Intel Israel or transfers from Intel operations abroad. For someone with a job offer at Intel Kiryat Gat, the city becomes a practical consideration in a way it wouldn't otherwise be. Working at Intel while living in Kiryat Gat creates a different lifestyle than commuting from central Israel, which some Intel employees do. The commute from Tel Aviv or even Ashkelon adds significant time and stress, while living locally allows for short commutes and more time with family. Some Intel employees start by commuting and eventually relocate to Kiryat Gat or nearby areas for quality of life reasons. Others remain committed to living in the center despite the commute. Beyond Intel, the local job market is limited. There are other industrial and manufacturing employers, and the city has the usual local economy of retail, services, and public sector jobs. But for professionals in most fields, employment means either working at one of the major employers or commuting. The commute to Tel Aviv is substantial, about an hour by car under good conditions, longer during rush hour. The train connects Kiryat Gat to the national network, with the ride to Tel Aviv taking roughly an hour. For occasional travel, this is manageable, but daily commuting is a significant commitment that affects quality of life. The physical environment of Kiryat Gat is southern coastal plain, flat, and agricultural, with a dry climate that's hotter than the center in summer. The city itself has older neighborhoods from its development town era, alongside newer construction that's gone up as the city has grown. The newer areas tend to be more pleasant, with modern buildings and better planning. The older areas show their age, with the utilitarian architecture common to development towns of that period. The city has invested in improvements over the years, with parks, public spaces, and infrastructure upgrades. But it's not a picturesque place and doesn't have natural beauty as a draw. Schools in Kiryat Gat serve the local population and include the standard Israeli streams. Quality varies, and the city's socioeconomic challenges affect educational outcomes in some schools. Families considering Kiryat Gat typically research specific schools carefully, as the variation can be significant. There are no international or bilingual options, so children attend Hebrew language schools. For Anglo children, immersion works as it does elsewhere in Israel, though without other English-speaking children around. The experience may feel more isolating than in communities with Anglo populations. The religious landscape includes synagogues serving different populations, with Sephardic and traditional congregations reflecting the city's demographics. There isn't a Dati Leumi community comparable to Givat Shmuel or parts of Jerusalem. For observant Anglos, finding a synagogue that fits would require exploration, and English accessibility would be limited. The city has a range of religious observance among its residents, from traditional to secular. Healthcare is accessible through Kupat Holim clinics in the city. For major medical needs, Barzilai Medical Center in Ashkelon and Soroka Medical Center in Beersheva provide hospital services. The distance to major hospitals is greater than in central Israel, which matters for some families, particularly those with ongoing medical needs. The social experience for the few Anglos in Kiryat Gat involves full integration into Israeli society. Without an Anglo community to plug into, relationships develop with Israeli neighbors, colleagues, and other parents through school. This requires Hebrew proficiency and comfort operating without English language support. Some people thrive in this environment, feeling that it accelerates their integration and creates deeper connections to Israeli life. Others find it isolating and struggle with the lack of people who share their background and understand their experience. The city's reputation among Israelis remains influenced by its development town history. Even as economic conditions have improved, there's a perception of periphery, of distance from the action, that affects how some people view it. Within the city, residents often feel this reputation is unfair and point to the improvements and opportunities that have developed. For Anglos, reputation may matter less than practical considerations, but it's part of the context. Quality of life in Kiryat Gat depends heavily on what you're looking for. If you value urban energy, cultural amenities, Anglo community, and proximity to Tel Aviv, the city has little to offer. If you prioritize affordable home ownership, short commutes to a local job, space, and don't need English language social infrastructure, it might work. The calculation is different for someone with a job at Intel than for someone who would need to commute to Tel Aviv daily. The security situation is worth mentioning. Kiryat Gat is within rocket range from Gaza, closer than central Israel, though not as close as Ashkelon or Sderot. During conflicts, the city experiences sirens and rocket fire, with the Iron Dome providing protection. Residents have safe rooms and shelters, and life continues with awareness of the security situation. For some families, this is a deal breaker, while others accept it as part of living in Israel's south. For Anglos specifically considering Kiryat Gat, the realistic scenario is usually employment-driven. Someone gets a job at Intel or has a spouse who does, and they need to decide whether to live locally or commute. The advantages of local living are real: affordability, short commutes, avoiding the stress of daily travel. The disadvantages are equally real: isolation from Anglo community, distance from the center, limited cultural offerings, and a city that's still developing rather than established. Some families use Kiryat Gat as a launching point, living there for a few years while saving money and paying down a mortgage, then potentially moving closer to the center later. Others settle in and build lives there, finding that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks for their circumstances. A few try it and leave, finding the isolation and distance too challenging. If you're considering Kiryat Gat, the advice is to be honest about your priorities and needs. Visit the city, spend time there, understand what daily life would actually look like. Connect with anyone you can find who's lived there as an Anglo, though this may be difficult given the small numbers. Consider whether you're someone who can thrive without Anglo community support, whether your Hebrew is strong enough for full integration, and whether the practical benefits align with your life circumstances.